how can we save AmeriCorps, because it's, as they say, it's one of the most critical times in our nation's history in terms of national service. And I want to say to myself, I'm not going to just ignore this and take a step back. I want to do something, and there will be consequences, positive, negative, but I'm ready to face those consequences. Right now, I was having a fifth term with the state of Delaware's state of volunteer office, and basically I was working with alumni engagement. It's been like very confusing throughout this changes. So my position was originally an environmental position, but things, apparently they said that's not priorities before, so I switched to alumni engagement. And it was good. So for a couple of weeks, a couple of months after this confusion, I was basically trying to elevate, like what you do, Nikki, for all the AmeriCorps alums serving Delaware, because like they need their voices heard, and regardless of what happens, we want to just share their story. Anything else, you can be on hold. But it was crazy how we would get that living stipend, but not able to serve because of the against. And we always talk about efficiency, and I didn't really find that efficient in my opinion back. But in terms of that service channel, I've been raising my voice. I've been just raising my voice, and sometimes, like you said, I didn't get a lot in our first time we talked, or not. Like, we got to put a face to it, and
yes.
I'm willing to put a face to what I stand for, because I really believe it. I really like to believe I'm pretty. I say I don't really want to rock the boat, and that's something that can be debated. But when something I'm really passionate about, like public service, national service, or AmeriCorps, I speak my mind. And if there's any any outlets are willing to talk to me, I'm going to do it. I wrote a letter to my editor when the dojing happened, and I spoke to
AmeriCorps Connections Podcast, the unofficial hub for AmeriCorps and national service alum who are still showing up long after their service term is finished. If you've ever served or know someone who has, then you are in the right place. But I want to get serious. We're in some unprecedented times for our country and for the legacy of AmeriCorps. If you've listened to this podcast, then you know that those AmeriCorps members, they were tutoring students. Some of them were building houses. Some of them were working in environmental education. They were serving our seniors. They were serving our students, our communities, and they were just making things better for America. I could go on, but if you're a fan of the content of this podcast, then we need you to speak up and speak out. Please consider contacting your member of Congress by using the Voices for National Service tool, which is going to be linked in the show notes. AmeriCorps is an investment we want to support. Please reach out to your congressperson and let them know that this evidence-based and evaluated program shows a return of $34 for every federal dollar invested. AmeriCorps is one of the most cost-effective investments our country can make in education, disaster response, in health and environmental stewardship, and so much more. Plus, as you know from listening to this podcast, the AmeriCorps, the alum, we go on from this program, more than 1.3 million of us, we go on to be leaders, teachers, public servants, business owners, doctors, and so much more. If you listen to this content and you found it valuable, please consider using the tool in the show notes, reaching out to your congressperson and letting them know you are either an alum yourself or you are a friend of AmeriCorps and you believe that you want this program to be invested in. Now we're going to move on to our next episode. And again, if you are a fan of this, please subscribe if you're on YouTube and share this podcast far and wide. Even share it with your member of Congress. Let's share the stories of AmeriCorps. So thanks for listening, and on to our next episode. All right. Here we are back with another AmeriCorps Connections podcast. It's been a minute, but if you're not paying attention, then you're not paying attention. There is a lot going on, and more than ever, we need to get these stories out. So I am excited to be back with a guest that we had way back in 2024 that folks, you aren't even, this is going to blow your mind, but Alex Tran has 3 terms of service possibly 4. We got to just follow this track. And we have Alex back on the podcast today. And I'm so excited to introduce and have this conversation and understand and learn what you've been up to, what you've been doing, and how all of this funding and all of this interruption has impacted your service, and how it has made you grow as a person, and how it has had you lean into your community, and also how we all have started to understand how important national service and AmeriCorps is to all of us. Alex Tran, I am excited to have you back on this podcast. We're going to touch on your service stories. Folks, Alex was back on episode 39. That was in February 2024. Today, we're going to look forward thinking and what has been happening since then. So, Alex, welcome to the AmeriCorps Connections Podcast, and tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I do appreciate that. As you may know, Nikki told me about my service story, and I think we mentioned it and can mention the last time we talked. But basically, I think the last time I did talk to Nikki, I was literally going to join a conservation corps, basically start my 4th term of service of AmeriCorps, State and National, the American Conservation Experience. And literally after that conversation, I literally from Delaware, I headed to North Carolina, or Asheville, North Carolina. And initially it was supposed to be a 3-month thing, from I'll be done with May, but I just fell in love with nature. I fell in love with the ideas of defending public lands and working with them. I love just learning about our impact, as our human impact. And I learned so much that I stayed and I left in the end of December. So what turned to be about 3 months initially was a whole year. And through that time, I got to travel again around the country, from states like Kentucky to Georgia to Ohio to South Carolina, even North Carolina, and to states I'd never been to before, where I would just camp and just experience that type of solitude. And I had opportunity to respond to disaster again when there were massive floods in Iowa in 2024. And compared to NCCC, which is a term I did, it's very similar. ACE, or American Conservation Experience, is very similar to that. A lot of conservation corps, you get to eat, sleep, and work with your teammates, and it's more environmental focused. And it was just nostalgia, but I fell in love, made deeper connections, and that was a great time. And I was really sad to leave, but good things must come to an end, as fortunately people come and go. And right now I was having a 5th term with the state of Delaware's state of volunteer office. And basically I was working with alumni engagement, but it's a funny story how that transformed throughout the last 6 months and the original story of that. And I do work for FEMA as a reservist. When disaster spawns, I will respond in more of a recovery capacity, but yeah.
So I'm just going to say, Alex is very humble, so I'm going to have to interrupt a lot on this.
Oh my God.
Because you went to Asheville, North Carolina, and if people aren't paying attention, there were floods. There was it was a hurricane. It was a
tropical storm, but it was a hurricane throughout the whole.
It was basically South. Everybody's oh, this is going to be bad. And they were oh my God, this is way inland. But you were there, boots on the ground, serving. And that was when you were with, is it called American Conservation Experience, ACE?
Yes, I was. It was with ACE. And I wasn't responding to that disaster particularly, but I was in that disaster. I literally experienced that, and it was a crazy event. And we can go, if you want, we can go into more detail. But yeah, it was insane. But ACE did respond. ACE and other AmeriCorps teams, they respond to the post Helene recovery efforts. So yeah,
I think for the purposes of the AmeriCorps Connection podcast, NCCC members and those members that work in FEMA or served in FEMA Corps and have done response, I think it would be interesting for folks that are listening to hear about your experience, if you're comfortable sharing about that experience. As far as I know, because I was just a bird's eye view on social media, there was not a huge preparation. So it wasn't everybody was prepared for this massive event. Can you tell us a little bit about
your experience?
Absolutely. And I can just start from the very beginning, from like how when I got back from a project and to the couple of days in before of the day of the storm and the post. And it's like I would span about be like a 5 to 6 day venture. It was around like end of September when Helene happened, and I just got back with my crew with a project in South Carolina. We were working at this like national park site. And it was great. And I got nothing too much though of the upcoming storm. But I vaguely remember when I was at that camp in South Carolina, this fellow a neighbor camper said to us, "You're going to escape the storm." And then I was like, "Well, what storms?" And I didn't
Yeah.
think too much of that. So we got back around the last week of that Wednesday, and we were just processing and ACE, like the people's term of service come and go, and we're just like celebrating. But I remember when I got back that Wednesday, it was very cloudy. It was not a lot of sunshine. And like the very like next 2 days, it just started raining and raining. And I was told by the local county emergency managers and other officials saying that they said, and there's going to be a storm. We're going to be prepared, but you shouldn't be too worried about that. And that's what they said. That's what I remember. And I got too much of that. I think we had some water prepared, but that was much about it in terms of the storm itself. And it was raining and raining. And what happened was that the day of the storm, like I woke up in the morning, I heard this loud cracking of winds, and I hear my phone just like that Amber Alert sound. It just goes like beep, 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 beep. And it was just constantly for about from 7, 8 in the morning, just warning, evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. And eventually then we just lost power around the whole town. And basically once the electricity ran out, the backup kicked in, but that eventually ran out. Then we eventually lost telecom. Then we lost eventually lost water, but basically we lost all forms of just like resources. And for those 2 to 3 days, it was kind of crazy. Like the first day, people were just trying to play along with the power, trying to figure things out and play cool because we had confidence in the local authorities. But the second day, oh, this is real, and the radio comes and it's, oh, this is a big deal because it was bad because there's no way to communicate with each other with our team, and we were trapped on all sides. So like in Western North Carolina, like the roads from Tennessee, which is like the west side, the roads from the north to Ohio, and like from the eastern part of North Carolina and the southern part, were all trapped. It was all like trapped by what, like the fallen trees from the Appalachian, the national forests. And luckily in ACE, we had a lot of people who were from Florida, so these Floridians, they knew how to handle hurricane disaster. And luckily there's another guy, his name's also named Alex, great guy. He led the charge, spearheaded the charge, and how to like spearhead everyone in our local like shared housing about how we can just evacuate and safely. So at the very last day, we got everyone safe basically, and everyone was safe to go. But everyone I knew made it out okay. And at the end of the day, we had to leave, and I evacuated to Ohio because Delaware was 12 hours, and my brother who lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, was 8 hours, and we were just told to go, and I just went there, and I went like all the way South Carolina, back up to North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, and that was just how the story is. But throughout that time, there was a lot of like damage and devastation, a lot of things, and a lot of people that lived there that find near dear in their heart, like their favorite bars, their favorite stores, their like houses just gone. So basic everything that meant something to someone, that some personal attachment, was literally just away. And this is again, you don't really get tropical storms in Western North Carolina, so
Right.
it was
Right.
interesting. But yeah, I think that's just a summary it's the first time I experienced that. Like I've been responding to like disasters, like for example, Louisiana, and there was like COVID, and there was like Iowa, those floods. But it's the first time I experienced like a disaster myself. And I will never understand other disasters mentalities, but just after that event, I really wanted to do nothing for a week. I was feeling guilt that I could have been back there doing more, but I couldn't because that's what I could do. And I realized through AmeriCorps and through that, we help when we can, and we need to stand back when you need to.
During your ACE service, before the tropical storm flew into the northern part of North Carolina, what were you guys focused on? Yeah.
Oh, West. So basically what ACE does is, again, it's a conservation corps, and we focus on working on mostly public lands where we help the land basically remove invasive species and build trail, and basically any other things that the parks or like the national forest sees. So that really mainly works with the national park system, and where I've worked with a lot of members of the national park staff, and we were just that auxiliary. You know how a lot of parks and a lot of public institutions are always understaffed, and there's never a budget for them. And that's where usually AmeriCorps comes in.
Gotcha.
And it supplements the help, the capacity right there. So, for between February and that hurricane in September, I initially just traveled across the country, like I said earlier, and basically in the car or in a truck. We had a trailer this time, and in CCC, you just get a van. But I was like, oh, wow, we have a trailer this time. This is really nice. And like, oh, my, it's luxury. So we would just go find camp, break camp, and we'd just live in the outdoors and just do what needs to be done. And actually, I learned that what inspired me to do conservation is, remember we talked about in our last podcast, was Maui, the Maui wildfires. And I found out through my conservation experience that one of the main reasons which helped me inspire me to join conservation is that the devastation in the Maui wildfires of one of many reasons was because of these invasive species. So there was a bunch of invasive species in the island of Maui, and because for some reason it wasn't managed properly, and that caused a lot of like tinder and a lot of like perfect brush for it to start. And with the winds and the heat and lack of rain, it was a perfect combination. So learning that shows that I was doing this work that can help prevent like the next wildfire, natural disaster. So that was very rewarding.
I want to double down. And one of the things that's important about the AmeriCorps Connections podcast and where we are with things is that these are national service members that are doing this really important work. And when they're not there, that work can't be done. And so that brush can't be cleared. And those fires could go on because we don't have bodies to manage those things. And the fact that you were there and you experienced and you understood and you learned how to manage those wild areas is super important. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You might even
no, absolutely. And that's what I was gonna actually say, that in the long wind thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why AmeriCorps is important, because again, a lot of people like in these public institutions like the National Service, the National Forest, and the National Park Service, and other like state parks or just like lands, even private lands, say that we couldn't have done without your help. They could have done it, but it'd be expensive and it could have been time consuming. And that's where AmeriCorps, we're just willing to do this work, and it's hard, but we'll get things done, you know? Remember, to quote one of my managers from ACE, people need help and we help people. And the forests are people. We have this connection with the forest.
Yeah, it's so easy for us who dwell in homes to forget that we are part of that. We really are. We can go into, I need a spin-off podcast about like esoteric stuff, but that we are all made of stardust. We're all made of the same stuff. We are the earth. So you had your experience with ACE. Unfortunately, was your service cut short because of Helene, or were you able to come back?
I was able to come back. I actually had some planned time off. Funny enough, people thought I was leaving, but I decided to stay a little bit longer because I had no plans for the rest of the end of 2024. So I was basically like, I wanted to finish the year strong. I mean, I did the whole year, and it was like, it wouldn't make sense for me just to finish out that. So Helene happened, I evacuated, came back early November, like mid-November. Then I finished the rest till Christmas. So I had this like final epilogue with ACE, and I said my goodbyes properly. I felt like if I said goodbye during Helene, it would be very like sudden. It was very like COVID-esque. But yeah, I'm glad I could have that proper closure, and it was great, you know. So, but to answer your question, no, I completed my term successfully. more than Dosa. I always want to stay more, but I think it was time for me to go, and I'm glad that people at ACE in the Asheville branch it really made me realize that, because AmeriCorps is not permanent, but at the same time, it should be permanent as an institution itself.
Preach to that. Preach to that. That AmeriCorps should be an avenue for folks to experience it, to figure things out, right? I don't know. In my AmeriCorps experience, I definitely learned so many things, more about myself, and then double down so much about my community. And we need to make sure and ensure that people are still able to have that experience. And that is also part of the reason to have everybody on this podcast right now. Alex, after your ACE experience, did you go straight to FEMA? How did that situation happen?
Been between like my on-call reservist status, and I've yet to be deployed. It's been like 6 months, but because of availability, I'm not. But I'm excited to start because it is peak responder season, as my person boss, or peak hurricane or wildfire season. So I'll be ready, and I'll be gone, and I'll be busy. But in between that, I was actually and I wanted to, and I was asked to come back to my old team. So like my Vista team, and basically do something with this state of Delaware volunteerism. And so in between like my FEMA, I would be working on this, and it's been like very confusing throughout this changes. So my position was originally an environmental position, but things, apparently they said that's not priorities before, so I switched to alumni engagement. And it was good. So for a couple of weeks, a couple of months after this confusion, I was basically trying to elevate, like what you do, Nikki, for all the AmeriCorps alums serving Delaware, because like they need their voices heard, and regardless of what happens, we want to just share their stories and try to promote like tangible benefits for AmeriCorps alums in Delaware. So that was the plan I was doing. In between, then the cuts happened, which was insane.
So how are you? Are you currently in the pursuit of elevating AmeriCorps alums' voices in Delaware? How can we get our viewership involved?
No, I'm not. No. I want to, but when we got like removed, so I'm not sure like how the grants work on the grant side.
Got you.
But once the grants were like terminated and hold, they explicitly told us in these emails not to go back to work, not to serve. They
Okay.
said you're forbidden. You can do anything else. You can be on hold. But it was crazy how we would get that living stipend, but not able to serve because of the against. And we always talk about efficiency, and I didn't really find that efficient, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think we find ourselves in this conversation in an interesting impasse of what are we actually able to do? And I'm curious, given the restraints of the current situation, what have you found? Where have you found outlets to fuel that service, to fuel that connection with community?
I've always been, like I said, a volunteer at heart, and I found out through AmeriCorps. And I had to re-say this, like before AmeriCorps, and you think because of COVID, I didn't really care about service or community or volunteerism. And that all changed, and I fell in love with it. But in between this pause, I've been just volunteering, as usually I am. And I was volunteering at my local state parks using my new bottom skills. And it just fills me joy, like being back in the forest or like in some type of wooded area gives me a sense of tranquility. And I do use my new knowledge to help other people and tutor other people with that. I meet all people through my volunteerism because you meet really interesting people through that time. So I've been just doing that. And also, again, I like to give back. So once in a while, I go back to my home roots with Habitat for Humanity in Delaware and some of Delaware affiliates. And I do volunteer. It's good to see some old folks and some people I've met on the way. So that's how I give back. But in terms of that service channel, I've been raising my voice. That I've been just raising my voice. And sometimes, like you said, I think in our first time we talked or not, like we got to put a face to it. And
Yes.
like, I'm willing to put a face to what I stand for because I really believe it. I really like to believe I'm pretty, I say I don't really want to rock the boat. And that's something that can be debated, but when something I'm really passionate about, like public service, national service, or AmeriCorps, I speak my mind. And if there's any any outlets are willing to talk to me, I'm going to do it. I wrote a letter to my editor when the doging happened, and I spoke to the New York Times, obviously off duty, and on Florida's administrative off duty. So I got to speak it, and my voice was heard. And I'm just trying to like talk to other fellow AmeriCorps alums and people have been, I would say, doged, and just basically organizing and just trying to say how can we save AmeriCorps, because it's, as they say, it's one of the most critical times in our nation's history in terms of national service. And I want to say to myself, I'm not going to just ignore this and take a step back. I want to do something, and there will be consequences, positive, negative, but I'm ready to face those consequences.
That's so powerful. And I think something that you said that was so important is that right now is such a critical moment for national service. And it's such a critical moment for connection and for us to find common ground, which is in the AmeriCorps pledge. It's also a critical moment for us to find resilience, and it's a critical moment for us to listen, and not listen to be right, but listen to learn and listen to be curious. And I just want to thank you so much for your courage to come on the podcast and to share your experience. And yeah, it's not necessarily, and this is me speaking as Nikki, not affiliated with AmeriCorps, not affiliated with Alex, but this is not a political issue. The government agency of efficiency came into AmeriCorps and said, this is not efficient. You get, I don't know, it's like $17 return on every dollar that you spend in AmeriCorps. I would fight that to say that really is efficient. That really is doubling down. And not only are you getting an impact in your community, you're getting an impact in leaders and people like Alex, people like me, people like everybody that I've interviewed on this podcast. They're giving back to the world, not just giving back into their, but also bottom line, we're paying taxes. So sorry, I'm stepping off my soapbox.
No, absolutely no. Again, like your tax dollars, like your tax, you're right. And this is my opinion too. Your tax dollars fund things like AmeriCorps, like they're essential services as well. So it's not political to say that my money funds this service and we should have that. Like it could be political, it could be opinion, but I'm just saying in fact, this funds this and you get return on your investment. And look, I was a business major. So, if I say invest $1 and I get $17 back, I would call that a good investment. I could be, again.
I have a business degree.
No, and you don't even need a business degree. That's just like math. And listen, has there been like fraud? Has there been abuse in some forms of public institutions? Yeah, of course, like everywhere, of course. But to quote what I said in the New York Times, I like to believe it, but I don't see it. So
amazing. Yes. And we'll have links to all of your publications, and super impressive. And for those folks that don't know, Alex does hold a presidential award in volunteerism, who was given by our friend and our boy, Michael Smith. Shout out. This has been a great reunion. We reached out. I put a shout out to everybody who has been impacted by these cuts. And I really wanted to, the series is called Let's Talk About This. And I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to put a face to these stories. I wanted to get this information out. And the fact that you were a previous guest in a different situation, in a different world, I think that this is just really important. So
yeah, I just feel like, not to I just feel like the year has
ahead.
changed. Like I felt like the mood, or I think that there's a different sense of optimism. Like when we first talked about that in terms of what has happened, transpired in a year, like there's like all the work AmeriCorps does is super critical and it needs to be done. It should be done yesterday. I agree. But I feel like this is a much different environment. Like it's about to fight for what our identity, not our identity, or what we give us purpose. And I feel that's a equally greater fight to save what we cherish and that what we think is good. So again, it's something to deal with. And again, I always thank Nikki for doing that in terms of what has changed for me in 1 year and next year, like from internally and just external parties around. It's a different world, and a much different world. You can sense it, you know.
Absolutely. And I think that you just encapsulated the message perfectly. So as we start to close things out, I wanted to ask you, like, what are your thoughts for how we move forward? Of course, there's contact your congresspeople, contact your representatives.
Yes.
You have been very vocal. You have sent letters to the editor. You've been published in, you said, the New York Times,
The
right?
New York Times, yes.
I mean, just that small publication.
I mean, it's just another newspaper. Well,
It's
well,
you
yeah.
know, let's one of the things that we do best as AmeriCorps members is lean into humility. So let's just give Alex like the snaps that he deserves for doing that. So I have two questions, but I'll start with this one. So what do you advise folks that love AmeriCorps? And I'm not even gonna just say AmeriCorps alums, just the AmeriCorps family. What should we be doing right now?
That's a great question. What should we be doing? I know there are multiple fronts to fight the good fight and talk about how can we move forward from this. I know that there were lawsuits going on in 24 states, and there's permanent injunctions of those states, including mine. Those grants are restored for this fiscal year. So that's fantastic. We should celebrate. People are starting to resume that service, and they're trying to figure out how to do this. That funding will run out. So my question is, where do we go from here? It's, for me, I want to be like, first of all, I say, I don't know. I don't know your situation. So you have to say, first to say, I don't know. The second, after you say you don't know, you got to figure out a plan. So I think what we should do is, on a personal, don't freak out. Don't freak out. Don't catastrophize too much, and don't stress out. From my history, if I was right, in 2017, like AmeriCorps budget was zeroed out by that administration, and there was a fight, and we won. So this is, and again, it's just the same thing over and over again, a push and pull. I was in Niagara Falls in the U.S., this American side, and basically talk about privatization of public land back then. So it's always a push about these push and pulls. And again, we're just at this push and pull and this injunction, and it's again important that we win. So the first thing is not to freak out, because when we freak out, we don't get much accomplished. And the second time, I guess to pair it could just don't let you contact, do what you can, but just stick to your community and organize, you know? Things should come from the grassroots level. And that's what I'm trying to do. You know, a lot what many are trying to do is trying to consult all the AmeriCorps alums, the people who support AmeriCorps, and to listen to our voice. Remember, like, once one can be easily ignored, but when there's lots of us, we can't be ignored. I think that's the most thing. Don't freak out and just organize at the moment. And that's kind of cliche, but at the moment, that's all we got, you know?
Have you seen the meme of all of the fish swimming? And then there's like one fish that I don't know. And they're like, if you just turn around, you don't realize how much power you actually have as a collective. And it's like, go alone, go fast, go together, go far. I feel like those encapsulate some of the messaging that you had said. And I'm not going to bring up another issue, but I think that something that's important is the privatization of public land. And I'm just going to go off on a tangent for a moment, and then we're going to close it out.
I love tangents. That's why
tangents are good. But this is the thing. Anyways, when we are disconnected from the land, we are disconnected from our humanity. And I'm just going to say, I'm not saying that there's like this conspiracy theory or there's these people that are like trying to keep us disconnected from the land. But why are we trying to make access to our planet difficult for people? We should all have free access to clean water, free access to clean land, and free access to clean air. Sorry, you said something that just kind of really hit me, just because I'm seeing things play out where things are there in the area that I live in Maryland. The access to water, like 90% of it is private. And we live on so many accesses to water. And one of the reasons I chose the community that I live in is that the access to the water is open. There's no gates, there's no codes or anything like that. And to me, it's really important to be able to access a body of water as a human being. So I'm going to step off that pedestal. Do you have anything to add to that weird tangent that I just went in, especially because you spent so much time under the stars and on the land and sleeping and waking up to probably like wild noises?
Oh
When you're
yeah,
waking
yes,
up.
yes. There was occasion like on my there like a black bear right next to my tent. After I had one of my core mates, he had like spikes on his tent around his tent, and that was pretty funny. But in terms of your esoteric question about, I think so. If you ask questions like, why do people want this land? And it's beautiful,
Yeah.
it's great, and I feel like there's always a motive. It could be profit driven, it could be just personally driven, because some people just want this all for themselves. And having like these resources give you power. And I
Yep.
think at the end of the day, humans want power because we want to be in control. And having control gives you freedom, and freedom allows you to shape your own destiny in that sense of logic, I guess. But I dismiss that because I think that having access to all of these lands publicly and just resources in general that make just to live just makes us better humans, and to fight every single day for these resources is a struggle, and it takes a toll on the psyche. And for me, as a person has done a lot of work for altruistic reasons, like it's good. At the same time, I think this should be accessible. I say AmeriCorps is a part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. And I want to keep that part of the solution, And the fight for public lands, again, is just a battle that, besides affordable housing, is something we all have to fight. And again, AmeriCorps can help that.
I love that. I love that you said AmeriCorps is not the solution, it's part of the solution. Hashtag that. Okay, that is probably the title of this episode. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this last question, and I will not interrupt, and I won't go tangent. Maybe. No promises.
That's fine.
What are you doing next?
What's doing next? So again, besides my current work with the government, and I will serve the people as best I can. And it doesn't matter your affiliation, doesn't matter your status. If you need help, I will help you, and I'll provide the best service as possible. So that's being said. And also, so with the injunction ruling in my favor, I think my state is willing to re-engage the project I was doing, and hopefully I can get back to alumni engagement. But in terms of after that, like 2026, I just don't know. I'm just taking one step at a time, but I do have some plans, and we'll see what happens. Just all I have to say. But I am definitely in that time is going to speak my voice and just advocate what I think is best for our country.
That's so funny. I was thinking you were going to go that way. So you just let us know if we all have to lean in any sort of campaign for Alex Tran for anything.
I get too kind, Lena. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at
that. This has been so great. This has been a beautiful reunion. Thank you so much. I know you have a busy schedule, so I appreciate your time. And folks, if you're loving these episodes, it's super important if you subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, seriously, it makes an impact on the algorithms. And until the next video, keep on serving and find your purpose and follow your passion and lean into yourself. So thank you so much. Thank you, Alex.
Well said, Nikki. Thank you for listening, everyone.